All right, we're going to start with drawing challenge 1, this simple part. I'm taking a look at the assignment right now. As you can see, we're going to develop this drawing as a one-to-one drawing on letter size paper. It's going to be landscape. And you've got a couple key things right here regarding the start point or the center point for this part. And we're going to start first with basic drawing setup. We're going to look at some format settings, and then we'll be able to take a look at developing the design and some of the draw and modify tools that we'll be using. And then finally we'll take a look at page setup for presentation from the model space. So again, if we take a look at the target output and we take a look at the scale, we can easily determine the drawing limits for this particular part. Let's go ahead and take a look at our AutoCAD so we can see how we will proceed. So here we are. I'm going to start with a new drawing, and we should have the startup dialog box. Now if you see this, you can go ahead and start with the acad.dwt template, but if you want to use the startup dialog box, here's what you could do. Just go ahead and open a drawing and type in startup at the command line, and what you can see here is that that dialog box is set to off. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to 1 and then go ahead and change the value so that I'm going to close this, and then now when I start a new file, instead of just seeing that list of drawings, what I'm going to see is the dialog box. So this way we'll be able to select from the very beginning a drawing from scratch. We're going to use imperial, feet and inches. Now the next step is take a look at your user interface here. Alright, I'm going to be using the menu bar so I can access the format settings that I want to use for basic drawing setup. So what I'm going to do here is, if you take a look at your quick access toolbar here, right, I want to use the flyout so I can show the menu bar, and this way I can access the format menu. So you can see here layers, you can see line type, you can see text style, and of course what we want to start with is the units and then define the drawing limits. So let's take a look at the units, and if we take a look at our drawing again, you can see that with our drawing the precision is just 2 decimal places. Right? So what we want to do here is we want to take a look at the unit format. We're using decimal. And over here, in terms of the precision, we're going to use 2 decimal places. Now, I'm actually going to use 3 decimal places because the sizing of my text, okay, for my notes, I'm going to use 1/8 inch text, which is 0.125, so I need the 3 decimals for precision there. But you'll see later on when we define the dimension style, we're only going to show 2. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to leave the angles as they are by default. And then down here in this area, you can see a sample of our output. So that's the units. I'm going to click OK here. And as well, we already figured out with pencil and paper what our drawing limits is going to be. And just to remind you, those drawing limits are the sheet size times the scale factor. So it's each side of the sheet times the scale factor, so we can determine the X and Y of the upper right corner in our drawing limits. So if we take a look again at format and look at drawing limits here, alright, the first thing you can see is you're prompted to enter the lower left corner. Now we're going to use the lower left corner 0, 0. So I'm just going to hit enter to accept that. The upper right corner, as you can see right now by default, is 12, 9. But what we're going to do here is we're going to input what we got for the results in determining our drawing limits. So if we're using a sheet size 11 by 8.5 and we have a scale of 1 to 1, our scale factor is 1. So all we're going to do is input 11, comma 8.5, and then enter. Now right now you don't see those drawing limits, but what we're going to do to show the drawing limits is we're going to now set up our drafting settings. Again, if you take a look at the status bar down here, you can see we have some drafting settings on and some are off. The important one here is going to be the grid. And before I turn it on, I'm going to do a right click and look at settings. When I do that, I get this dialog box that will allow me to set up all the other parameters for any of the other drafting settings I'm going to use. If you look at Snap and Grid tab, we're going to look over here in this area to the grid behavior. Now we do want adaptive grid, but down here we want to uncheck display grid beyond the limits. This will limit the area of the grid to only the defined drawing limits. So we'll want to make sure we can turn it on. You can see here we can use the function keys to do that. I'm going to skip over here to polar tracking, and I'm going to use something like 15 degrees. This will allow us to track 15, 30, and 45, and even 90-degree angles. When we look at object snap here, I want to make sure that I can snap to the endpoints, midpoints, center. You could use quadrant, intersection, and extension. I would avoid selecting all of them. Okay, these are dynamic settings, which means that at any time, even while you're in a drawing command, you'll be able to reset these or change them. Okay, so with these basic settings, I'm going to go ahead and click OK here, and now you can see the area of the drawing limits as the visible grid. Now we want to go ahead and continue with some additional formatting. We're going to take a look at the text styles and dimension styles that we're going to be using, and as well we're going to take a look at the layers. So let's switch tabs here. Let's go over to the Annotate tab, and you can see here from left to right I have text, and this little flyout arrow right here will allow you to access the text style manager, and then you can see it here for the dimension style manager. So let's take a look. Okay, if I go to the drawing here, you can see that we have one text style for our dimensions, and what we'll want to do here is we'll want to go ahead and also create a text style that we'll use to represent our title block information. Okay, so coming back here to the drawing, what I want to start with first is defining those two text styles. So I'm going to open up this text style manager, and what we're going to do is we're going to use annotative styles. These annotative styles are going to enable us to resize the annotations automatically depending on what scale we decide to use. So I'll start with the annotative text style here, and I'll create a new text style. This one I'm going to use for my notes, okay, or my title block information. So I'll just give it a name called Notes. And in terms of the fonts that you want to use, for now I'm just going to use the Romans SHX font. Here you can see a preview of that font style, and we want to make sure that it's annotative, and you could also see the three-pointed star there to indicate that it's annotative. And this text size is going to be 1/4 inch, 0.25. So it's going to be slightly larger than our dimension text. Okay, always apply before you close, and never hit this X or you'll cancel all your settings. Now before I do any of this, I'm going to create the second text style. Alright, this one I'll call it dims for my dimensions. Now you can see that's the style that I'm editing, and what I'll do here is I'll make this one slightly smaller, or I'll make it 0.125. Now pay attention there. Again, I'm able to set it to 0.125 because in my units I allowed for that precision. If you don't allow for that in your precision in your units, you don't have that anywhere else. Okay, So, and just to make it different here, I'm going to squeeze it a little bit by changing the width factor to 0.75, and I'll change the oblique angle to 7 to make it look italicized. Apply to save those settings, and you could take a look again. Here's notes, see the difference, and you see the settings, right? That's text styles. Let's go ahead and close, and up here, now you'll be able to see in the drop down what text styles you have available to you, okay? Let's go on to the next thing, the Dimension Style Manager. When I open up this dialog box, once again, you can see the list of available text styles. I'm going to start with annotative, and I'll create a new dimension style. In this area, you can see a preview of the settings for that particular dimension style. And as I go into the new, I can give it a name. I'll call this MDims for mechanical dimensions, and you could confirm here that it's annotative. Click on continue, and now tab by tab you can set the parameters for this particular dimension style. What I'm going to do here is, if you look at lines, okay, I'm going to keep everything as it is for right now and just focus on just a few of these features. When we're doing mechanical dimensions, we want to make sure that we're using closed filled arrows, and these I'm just going to set at 0.125. I'm going to make them slightly smaller. For the text, I'm going to use the text that I defined earlier, the dims text, and here you can see in the preview the change. Now also in the text height, you can see how it's locked. AutoCAD is managing the text height. Also, you can see the way that the text is aligned by looking in this area. It's always going to be shown horizontal. Now, in addition, take a look at the precision, right? I'm going to jump over here to primary units. I'm using decimal format, but for these dimensions, I'm only going to show 2 decimal places. Okay? Click OK, exit out of that, and then you could see what is the current dimension style here. It's the one that I created right now. I'm going to close, and then that way I've completed all of my annotations. The only thing that's remaining now is, how am I going to organize the model? And what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to use my layers. So if you come back here to the Home tab, in this panel you can see what are the available defined layers for this drawing. Right now I don't have any layers. What I'm going to do, other than the 0 layer, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on this button to access the layer properties or the layer manager, so I can create some layers. What I'm going to do is use this button to create all the new layers that I'm going to use. And one by one, I'll set it up here. We're going to start with the visible layer, right? That's going to represent the visible lines. When you click on the swatch, this is how you can apply the colors. Now you got over 255 colors and several methods to represent those colors, but I want you to pay attention to the standard colors here. These are the standard colors. For the visible layer, I'm going to use color 4, or what's called cyan. Click OK to apply it. So there you can see it's color cyan with a continuous line type. I'm going to continue creating more layers, and you can see any new layers are going to take on the properties of the previous layer. This next layer I'm going to call the hidden layer for all of the hidden lines that I'll be showing. This will be blue, and in order to change the line type for the layer, what I'm going to do is just click on the line type name for that layer. When I do that, I get the line type manager. Now you can see by default there's only the continuous line type. What I'll have to do here is use load and then search for the hidden line type. Now you can use the control button to load all of your line types at once. So if I control click, now I have the 2 line types selected there, and now they're loaded into my drawing. In order to complete this task, I need to tell AutoCAD which line type to use for this particular layer assignment. So I select hidden and then click OK. Now you can see those are the properties. Let's create a couple more. I'm going to create the dimensions layer, which is also going to be blue, but the line type there is going to be continuous. The next layer is going to be the center layer, which is going to be color green. And for the line type here, when I click on the name here, I'm going to select center. Next, I'm going to create the MS text layer, which is going to be red, and it'll be continuous. And then finally, I'm going to create a layer for my guidelines or my construction lines. And this could be any color because I'm eventually going to freeze it or turn it off so I don't see it. So I'm going to use one of the non-standard colors, just a non-standard color to show my construction lines. All right. So when I close this, it's actually a floating window. I can keep it open if I like, but I'm just going to use the control panel here, right, to switch between layers and to manage my layers using the layer status buttons right here. Okay, so at this point, this completes part one, all of the basic drawing setup settings that I want to make sure I set before I start drawing. Okay, in the next video, we'll take a look at actually developing the design.